Quiz 1.2 notes. All right, we're going to take this trinomial and divide by this binomial. So watch what happens here. We're going to take the 4x minus 3 and divide by the 12x squared minus 5x plus 9. In order to do that, we have to think what times 4x gets rid of the front. So if you think of 4 times 3 gives you 12, and x times x gives you x squared, so that means that it's going to be a 3x. And you watch this. We're going to take 3x and multiply it times the front, the 4x minus 3. And what we get when we do that, that becomes 12x squared, and that becomes negative 9x. We're going to put that 12x squared minus 9x right here. And then we're going to subtract down. Now why subtract down? Because that's what you do in long division. You take this times this, you put it underneath, and you subtract down. That's just the process. So as we subtract down, the front disappears. And let's think for a second. What's negative 5x minus negative 9x? So when you subtract, you got to be careful. That becomes negative 5x plus 9x, which is 4x. So be careful with that. So this becomes 4x, very commonly missed. We're going to bring down that 9. So next, what times 4x gives us this? Hopefully you can see that one's fairly simple. It's 1. So this should be a plus 1. So now we go 1 times the front, the 4x minus 3. That gives us 4x minus 3. All right. So we now have 4x minus 3 goes right down here. And like we said earlier, don't we subtract down? So as we subtract down here, this cancels out. And we have 9 minus negative 3. Well, hopefully you remember again that 9 minus negative 3 is really 9 plus 3, which is 12. So I have a remainder of 12 because there's nothing else to bring down. So my answer is the 3x plus 1 plus 12, which is the remainder, over the divisor, 4x minus 3. And that is our answer. So we are going to take this polynomial and divide by this polynomial. So what we get here is we get the x minus 3 divided by, but we want to put this other polynomial in standard form. So it'd be negative 3x cubed is first. Then you have a positive 2x squared. Then you have no x's. So I need to put 0 x's. That's actually pretty important to have that 0x. If you don't, it kind of malfunctions. And then you have a 5 left over. So once again, you must put placeholders. You can't have a missing piece. Once you start with the third, each piece needs a placeholder all the way down. Now, for this particular one, we don't have to do long division. Because there is no number in front, you can use synthetic. It's a nice little shortcut. So we're not going to do long division here. We're going to use synthetic to do this one. And to do synthetic is you think, okay, what makes this 0? And that would be positive 3. All right? And then you put the coefficients of each term right there. So you put negative 3, you put a positive 2, you put a 0, and you put a 5. All right? And we're going to do synthetic here. So with synthetic, what we're going to do is we're just going to bring down this negative 3, and then we multiply this times this. That gives us a negative 9. And then we're going to add down. When we add directly down, we get negative 7. Now we're going to multiply these two again. When we multiply those two, we get negative 21. And then we add down, and that gives us negative 21. So now we're going to multiply 3 times negative 21. So it gets a little long, but 3 times negative 21 is negative 63. And then we add down. When we add down there, we get negative 58. Now, how does all that help? What does that do? Well, we just divided. And you might be like, how did I just divide? Well, here is, this becomes your x. This becomes your x squared. All right? Because this is your number. This is your x. This is your x squared. So your answer, and this is and this last one is your remainder. So my answer is negative 3x squared minus 7x minus 21 minus 58 divided by the divisor, which is x minus 3. And that is your answer. This method is a lot easier, a lot less confusion, a lot less tricky stuff going on. You don't have to deal with subtraction, which a lot of people in long divide make errors in the subtraction. You just got to remember to be careful. The starting point is always the opposite, or what makes that 0. You got to make sure you put your stuff in standard form. You got to make sure you put zeros if something's missing. And there's a lot of other things to pay attention to on these kind of problems. But how did I know I can use synthetic? It's when there's no number in front of the x. Because it makes it easy to find what makes this equal to 0.